This is Christopher John Björkness. It is December 27th, 2024. I hope everyone enjoyed the Christmas fireworks and theatrics. I'm going to weigh in on the current kerfuffle over H-1B visas and the Indian takeover of American politics at the behest of higher powers. And I hope this doesn't come across as too arrogant, but I'm somewhat of an expert on this. I've had dear and close Indian friends all my life. And from the time I was a young child in the early 1970s through the 80s and 90s and beyond, my Indian friends always told me, with a little bit of a smirk on their face, that America is going to be theirs and that Jewish people were going to help them to colonize America, Canada, and Great Britain. And they would jokingly point out that the Patel section of the London phone book was the thickest part of the London phone book, and that the Patels greatly outnumbered the Smiths in England. So I've been aware of this all my life. I knew this was coming. I started warning about it publicly on the internet in 2006 that we were going to lose our country. I've also been warning people about this scam, this psyop that they're pulling on some of our most precious, good-natured, intelligent people, duping them into becoming Amish subsistence farmers and spending their entire lives working the soil and teaching their kids to do the same instead of educating their children to enter into academia, into the professions, into the CEOs and leading positions of our great companies in the United States. There has, in this entire period, been a process of discouraging, especially white males, from doing that, and instead encouraging them to pursue this Esau slave soldier lifestyle of either going into the military, especially during the Middle Eastern wars, and or becoming like the Amish, subsistence farmers, dirt poor, raising chickens, having their own vegetable gardens, living in very tiny houses. Well, Jewish people and the Asians were going to pour in and take over all of academia, fill the universities with their own students, gain all the professorships, promote all their people into the highest levels of corporate America, take over all the companies. In the 2000s, it really became taking over. The tech companies gave them the greatest political power. And my Indian friends, they refer to themselves as the community. They were a little bit leery about getting into politics because they always anticipated there would be a backlash against them. Many of them were mistreated as children, especially the Sikhs with their turbans. And young Sikhs have their turban wound up with a ball on top, and they got made fun of quite a bit for that. So they laid low, but they always told me that America was going to be theirs. It was going to be a colony of India, and that the Jews were going to help them to do this. They believed that the Jews were the most powerful people in the world. They worked with them for financing and establishing business relationships, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I sensed that in this Trump election, once Trump got elected, all these people who were creating these false perceptions of Trump as if he were an anti-Zionist and as if he were anti-immigration were going to be betrayed by the same people who boosted them. And I knew that this would start out on X. And because X had been the leading free speech, supposedly, platform, it pulled all the other platforms through competition into becoming more open and allowing more free speech. And now that X has clamped down, the other social media platforms are going to be free to begin really ramping up their censorship, because there will no longer be competition from X. So we can expect that if X continues to veer towards greater and greater censorship and backstabs the very people that X was boosting in order to get Trump elected through these false perceptions that they were promoting, that he was going to be a great savior of free speech, that he would cut off all forms of immigration, and that he was somehow playing 5D chess with the Israelis, and would once he gained power betray them, and that this was all an illusion, that Trump was psyoping the Israelis, and that he was really on American side. And they even called it America First when it was obvious that Trump was putting Israel first. He said he put Israel first. He said Israel should run the American Congress. And I've been shouting about this when Trump announced that he would run and started running in 2015. I pointed out his connections to the Adelsons and the fact that he was a traitor, that he was working with the Russians to get into power, to subvert NATO, and many other things. And all these pseudo-intellectual posers, especially in the alt-right and their affiliated people, pretend that somehow this is some kind of new phenomena that's happening that just sprang up in the 2024 election, when it was always obvious that Trump had been in bed with Roy Cohn, Trump had been in bed with Wilbur Ross, with the Adelsons, the whole way through. And this was always planned out. And this Indian takeover of America, I'm telling you, this has been planned out for my entire lifetime, and probably much longer than that. Probably going all the way back to the Sikh movement, when they created monotheism in India and made Sikhs very wealthy people. Sikhs are really taking over in Toronto and Canada. And I witnessed all this going on for my entire life. For over 50 years, I have been a witness to this. So we can expect this chain reaction. If X starts to hit censorship really hard, it'll pull down all the social media platforms because they'll no longer have competition. And they're doing this in a very clever way to pin the blame on the immigration issue instead of the anti-Zionism issue. Because many of these stooges that they have put up as their grifter class to delude people into supporting Trump and supporting Musk and supporting Vivek Ramaswamy, they created this whole mythology, this false perception that these people were working against the anti-Zionist program, working for the anti-Zionist program, and also working for the anti-immigration program. Now, Zionists and the rest of their people don't want to be perceived as the driving force of censorship. So they are very cleverly using the pretext of censoring people based on their supposedly racist anti-immigration platform. So now everyone is talking anti-immigration and they're getting censored, and that gets the Zionists off the hook, because this is not censorship done in the name of banning speech which is anti-Zionist. This is censorship done in the name of banning speech which is nativistic. They are going against nativism instead of anti-Zionism as a pretext. But these two groups, or one group, these two movements, with all the stooges that they put up to run this psyop on the American public, to get their Zionist leaders like Trump and the Republican Congress into power, so that this supposedly ridiculously named MAGA movement and America First movement is actually an Israel first, Russia second, actually China second, Russia third movement to subvert America. And I always knew that, because I've witnessed it, for 40 years, I've witnessed how they put these stooges out front to get their candidates elected, either through spoiler candidates like Ralph Nader and Ron Paul, or through candidates like Trump, they lie to people and they tell people that Trump is actually an anti-Zionist playing 5D chess, and that Trump is against all forms of immigration. Even throughout 2024, he said he was going to welcome in more H-1B visas. And it was very clear. I mean, anybody who's been watching this for as long as I have, all the signs were there. And I knew that eventually they would flip on these people and create infighting after the election to break apart the anti-Zionist movement and to get everyone talking about anti-immigration, and then to ramp up censorship and to pin the blame for the censorship not on the Zionists, but on the immigrants. And it's all a distraction and a deflection away from the real powers who are behind all this. And this is Straussian politics from Leo Strauss. And we used to talk about Leo Strauss a lot in the Bush years. Leo Strauss was a Jewish philosopher who studied Plato and Aristotle and picked up on Plato's concept of the noble lie. And the noble lie is the idea that rulers are physicians who practice the medicine of lying to the public, to persuade the public to do things that the rulers believe are best by deceiving the public with noble lies. And examples of noble lies would be like when George Bush was president and he lied about Saddam Hussein having anthrax, Colin Powell, etc., having anthrax and weapons of mass destruction. The Bush administration lied about the nature of 9/11 and deflected all the blame away from the Israelis and covered up the Israeli involvement in it. And all of that is part of this Straussian politics of duping people into electing candidates by telling people what they want to hear, but it's all lies, and then always intending to do the exact opposite and betray the very gullible people that they dupe into voting for them. They dupe the Christian Zionists into promoting Israel when Israel's plan is ultimately to wipe out the Edomites of the West. They duped people into believing all these lies about Saddam Hussein and about the Taliban being behind 9/11 so that they could get us involved in Iraq, the ancient Babylonian enemy that had to be destroyed to fulfill their apocalyptic messianic prophecies. They lied about the Taliban to get us involved in Afghanistan, where empires go to die, having the recent precedent of the Soviet Union collapsing in its fake collapse due in large measure to its overspending on military and its involvement in Afghanistan. All this was part of their plan to bring down America. Now, another part of this Platonic philosophy of the noble lie is to create a caste system. And part of this Straussian politics is to create a caste system in America where white men are at the bottom of the pyramid. And in many senses, the Platonic caste system predates the medieval Indian caste system. And what they always planned to do was to put Asians at the top of the pyramid together with Jewish people to take all the highest paying jobs, to be the wealthiest class, to be the Brahmins, and to rule over the lowest class of whites and put whites below everyone else, as is happening in South Africa. And so this Straussian politics has really been pushed. It was done in 2016 with the alt-right, who lied to people and said that Trump is a white nationalist, that he's an anti-Zionist, that he's our savior, that all of his connections to Russia are lies, that NATO is evil, that Russia is our savior. All of this subversive BS was put out as Straussian politics to get people elected into power who would be the greatest servants of Israel and the greatest servants of Russia to destroy America, to drive whites down the hierarchy in this neo-caste system, and to place Asians and Jews at the top of the pyramid of that caste system and to trample on whites. And they duped whites into voting for the very people who are proposing to fulfill this plan of this neo-caste system. And I've been warning again and again that this prepper movement and this movement to drive whites to not go to college, I remember many of these people, even around 2008, saying, don't go to college. If you're white, don't go into the professions. Become a prepper, become a subsistence farmer, become a soldier, fulfill the roles of Esau as his blessing from his father Isaac, to be the soldier and the servant of Jacob. And at the same time that they were doing that, they were massively increasing the immigration of Asians into America and encouraging and pushing those Asians into the highest levels of academia and the professions and the business world to replace all the whites. And they were refusing to hire whites to fulfill this neo-caste system. And this was all by design. So they were working it from two ends. They were encouraging whites to become subsistence farmers, and then they were allowing Asians to come in and take the whites' place. And if you look at charts of immigration, I see them floating around on X now, they talk about this big Russian immigration in the late 1880s through the 1920s. That Russian immigration was Russian Jews who took over Harvard University and all of the big Ivy League schools, and ultimately most of the major schools, colleges and universities in America. And I remember when I was a kid, even though the other kids, primarily the white kids, would mistreat the Indian kids, the teachers were always pushing the Indian kids and giving them better grades, often giving them, not always, often giving them better grades than they deserved. Well, they were giving white kids, especially the most intelligent ones, worse grades than they deserved. And they were encouraging whites to become working class heroes and go to shop class, etc., instead of pursuing higher education. Well, at the same time, they were always pushing the Asians to get higher education and portraying them as if they were the intellectual leaders of the class, making them the valedictorians, and again, boosting their grades and praising them in class. I was a witness to that. We also have another aspect of that same process of making whites anti-intellectual, working class communist heroes at the bottom of the pyramid of the caste system. We have people promoting this flat earth BS and this BS that nukes are fake, so that the Western world is discouraged from producing the highest state-of-the-art weapon systems like platform DEWs. I was involved with German physicists who for many, many decades have been promoting the idea of satellite platform DEWs as the greatest defense against these ballistic hypersonic missiles, which threaten our lives on a daily basis. And I've always been pushing for that idea that we need these satellite platform DEWs. So they're doing all of this subversively, and this is a Straussian plan to lie to the public that they are on their side, tell them what they hear, and then do the exact opposite once they get into political office. And they do this very often in the modern age with social media through subversive influencers who tend to be idiots. They have no vision. They have no plan. All they do is get you to elect the very people based upon their lies that they are going to be anti-Zionist and anti-immigrant, the very people who are the most pro-immigrant and the most pro-Zionist elected into office. And even before Strauss, we have examples of Woodrow Wilson running on a peace platform to keep America out of the war and then bringing America into World War I in exchange for the Balfour Declaration in a quote deal that was arranged that I've discussed many times, but I won't digress. Ronald Reagan, with his Christian evangelical moral majority, ran on the idea that he was anti-immigration and pro-unions. He was a Straussian. Neoconservatives filled his administration. They started out in the Nixon administration. They became most powerful in the Bush administration. Reagan then betrayed the unions. He had worn union hats in his campaigns, and then he betrayed the air traffic controllers in Patco and did terrible harm to the American transportation industry. Ronald Reagan granted the largest amnesty to illegal immigrants in the United States in United States history. And Trump is following in Reagan's footsteps. They lie to you. They tell you what you want to hear, and then they do the exact opposite to betray you. This is part of what I call the Red Sea trap, where Moses leads Pharaoh's army out into the Red Sea to use the Egyptians' hatred of the Israelites as a trap, so that when they go to fight the Israelites, they go into the Red Sea, which has been parted. The Israelites escape through it, and then the waters close in, and the waters are closing in on the alt-right. And this supposed coalition of anti-immigrant, anti-Zionists who were set up to be stabbed in the back in the double cross that's taking place today. And I always knew it was coming. But they'll keep these clowns and buffoons on a certain level, both to put pressure on Trump so that he cannot ever betray the Zionists, not that he ever would, but to put pressure on the whole political class to keep towing the line, because if they don't toe the line, then they have all these heavily boosted people to act as smearmongers, to hoard in and attack them in the name of pursuing anti-Zionism and anti-immigration. But actually what they're doing is enforcing the fact that these politicians have to remain Zionists and pro-immigration people. So they dupe you into voting for them in the name of nativism and anti-Zionism, but the people you're voting for are always the most staunchly pro-immigrant and staunchly pro-Zionist candidates. So let's have a look at Herr Leo Strauss. This is his Wikipedia page. Leo Strauss was an American scholar of political philosophy. Many Strausses are Jewish. Levi Strauss was a Bavarian Jew who created Levi's jeans, I believe. Born in Germany to Jewish parents, Strauss later emigrated from Germany to the United States. He spent much of his career as a professor of political science at the University of Chicago, where he taught several generations of students and published 15 books, trained in Neo-Kantian tradition with Ernst Cassirer, and immersed in the works of phenomenologists Edmund Husserl and Martin Heidegger. Strauss authored books on Spinoza and Hobbes. Hobbes did the Leviathan and the Behemoth that I've been talking so much about. Spinoza helped to establish the Shabbatian movement. And articles on Maimonides and El-Farabi. In the late 1930s, his research focused on the texts of Plato. Plato with his noble lie is what we're going to get at, and also with his caste system. And Aristotle, the Ayn Rand trust, crypto-communist libertarians are in love with Aristotle. because it enables them to privatize everything that should be done by the government so that you no longer have your federal rights. And they say that they have their private rights so they can exclude you. They're going to do that with currencies. They have done that with freedom of speech with the social media platforms. What they do is they take the functions of government, water supply, roads, etc. They set up toll roads. They tax you that way. And then when you are in one of their private institutions, they deny you your federal rights. When you're on social media, you don't have the right to free speech, according to them. So what they are doing is making the public square privatized and monopolized so that you no longer have any free speech. They're going to do that with our currency. They have done it with our garbage systems, our water systems, our electrical systems, our natural gas systems. All of this is done as a subversion in the name of liberty, but it's to take away your liberty. We have a plutocracy of trillionaires who are buying up everything so that when you have to engage to live, when you have to get a job, when you have to use a road, when you need water, when you need refuse service, when you need electricity, when you need natural gas, they come in and they say, well, you have to toe the line. We're going to give you a social credit score. And if you don't obey us, then you're going to die. And you cannot assert your federal rights because we are asserting our federal rights as private institutions. That's a big part of the trust, fake anti-communist libertarian movement. The other part of it is to get us on a gold standard, to screw over the American currency in favor of the communist nations and what has become BRICS. And the libertarians were always doing that. And I'm going to be talking more about that in the future because they want us to fight the Federal Reserve, but they're only doing it so that they can completely subvert America and weaken our economy. They are not going to replace it with anything that benefits us. They're not going to replace it by simply having the Treasury take it over. What they're going to try to do is get central bank digitized currencies. And what they're going to try to do is utilize those privately as social credit score type systems, where if you don't obey them, you die. So that is Leo Strauss, again, in the Bush era. We talked about him a lot because of the way that Bush and his cronies and all the neocons lied to the American public, knowing that they were lying in order to get us into self-consuming, self-destructive Middle Eastern wars. And the primary target of those wars was not the Middle Eastern nations, it was America. They were deliberately bringing us down. These were neoconservative Trotskyites who wanted to benefit Soviet Russia and communist China and bring down America so that the behemoth of the Eastern Eurasianist powers could overtake us. This is an article I'm going to read from. Prominent among the Straussian advocates for vigorous military engagement abroad have been Deputy Defense Secretary Paul Wolfowitz. I stumble over his name because I so despise him. Abram Shulsky, who heads the Pentagon's Office of Special Plans. Stephen Cambone, Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. Richard Pearl, former chairman of the Defense Policy Board, and William Crystal, editor of the conservative journal, The Weekly Standard. And Crystal's dad was a Trotskyite who was one of the main founders of the neoconservative movement. That was typical communist entryism, being the furthest left, taking over the right, and again, creating the false perception that they were anti-communist when they were, in fact, the most aggressive, virulent, and destructive Marxists and communists, the Trotskyites. And the alt-right is the same way. They pretend to be anti-immigration and anti-Zionist, and all they do is get Zionists and immigrationists elected. Their role has gained attention because central to Straussian ideas about governance is contempt for democracy and the necessity for deception at home as well as in war and diplomacy abroad. Now, Trump and Musk can claim that they weren't deceptive. They were always open about the idea that they were going to open up immigration even more, but make it legal and easy legal so that these people can come in and vote and completely take us over. It's much worse than the illegal immigration when we always have the option to kick them out and to not let them vote. But they're going to claim that they weren't deceiving us because they were open about this, but they were deceiving us because they completely suppressed and shadow banned me. And I was the primary voice for the last 30 years screaming about this deception. Well, at the same time, they were boosting all of these pseudo-intellectual jackasses who were pushing Trump on us and who now claim that they were somehow betrayed, that it was somehow not obvious in 2016 that Trump was working for the Zionist and immigrant agenda. And it's a farce. I mean, I was publicly criticizing these people, reaching hundreds of thousands with these criticisms, pointing this out for 30 years. It was always transparently obvious. But my point is that, well, they can claim that in their campaign speeches and in the things they said, they were open about the fact that they were anti-nativism and pro-Zionist, but they were covertly promoting all these voices who were creating the false perception that this was all 5D chess. So it was all part of the psyop. And they were very clearly in on it. They were very clearly suppressing me, and they were very clearly promoting the people that I was exposing, these pretenders, these posers who were pretending that Trump and Musk were somehow playing 5D chess. It has been obvious for decades, and I have been pointing it out for decades. So this is a farce. They can't really claim that they weren't deceptive because they were. They allowed this false narrative to continue. Trump had Kanye West and Nick Fuentes at Mar-a-Lago. They've been involved with Laura Loomer, et cetera, et cetera. Strauss, who died in 1973. Governance is contempt for democracy and the necessity for deception at home as well as in war and diplomacy abroad. Everything they do is a deception. Strauss, who died in 1973, taught dozens of students who formed almost a cult around the man in Chicago. Friedman, the economist, Milton Friedman, was another one at University of Chicago who was pushing these libertarian ideas of privatizing everything and discouraging companies from bearing any social responsibility and encouraging them to do the most horrific things as long as they were legal, and encouraging them to subvert the legislative branch of government so that government would never bar the horrific things that they're doing, like violating our rights to free speech. And they and their followers can be found in universities, the law, and in government promoting his ideas. Notice that white men are being encouraged to become subsistence farmers, while the Jewish Straussians and the Asians are being encouraged to go to the universities to become doctors and lawyers and to engage in government. And we're told not to vote and participate in government. And we're told not to put any candidates forward because it's a futile enterprise. So they screw us both ways. They discourage whites from doing anything on their own to take control of their fate, while at the same time they promote Asians and Jews to do exactly that. Despite the attention paid to the Straussians as a group, and especially to their elitism, mainstream journalists have neglected examining the thought of Strauss himself to see where it came from and whether it really has any substance. It ought to concern us that men with such influence in our democracy follow a thinker who embraced a notion of universal fascism. That's a slogan derived from Strauss's colleague in the late 1920s and 30s, a quasi-revolutionary neo-Hegelian Russian emigre in Paris, Alexander Koyeva, who influenced the end of history idea fashionable on the right after 1989. It's currently touted by Straussian camp follower Michael Ledeen of the American Enterprise Institute. The whole libertarian movement was filled with Jews. The whole alt-right movement was based on the ideas of a Jew. The article I was just reading from is Stop the Straussians Before They Lie Again, William H. Hickey, Jr. So this is where it ultimately derives from in the ideas of Plato. And this is quoting from Plato's Republic, chapter 3, 414. And all of this is relevant. You can go through and read this if you want, but I'm also going to quote similar passages from Plato's dialogues. How then, said I, might we contrive one of those opportune falsehoods of which we were just now speaking? In other words, how can we lie to the public? So as by one noble lie to persuade, if possible, the rulers themselves, but failing that, the rest of the city. What kind of fiction do you mean? These people have been feeding us the fiction that Trump is on our side, that Trump is anti-Zionist, and that Trump is anti-immigrant. That's the noble lie in this that they're telling us. They're also giving us the noble lie that Hamas is responsible for the destruction of the Palestinians, which is being perpetrated by the Israelis. I've been countering their noble lie that Israel is surrounded by enemies and is the only ally and democracy in the Middle East that Americans have. And all of these series of lies to portray Israel as an innocent victim. And I've been revealing the fact since 2006 that the Saudis, the House of Saud, which rules Saudi Arabia, are crypto Jews, that all of the governments in the Middle East are working for Israel's interest to fulfill Jewish messianic apocalyptic prophecy, that they are all, the leadership is all in bed with the Israelis, and they only fight against the Israelis to provide the Israelis with a pretext to have the United States give them hegemony in the region by destroying these very governments, and to provide Israel with a pretext for greater and greater land grabs to form greater Israel. And I've given all of the citations of Israeli leaders saying exactly that in my book, The Manufacture of Sale, of St. Einstein in 2006, and in various other outlets. And I've been saying it over and over and over again. And it's beginning to register with people because you can't miss it anymore. Everything that I anticipated is now history. So let's, pardon me for a moment while I get to where I got to be. So this is the summary introduction of Book 3 of the Republic. One moment. I think I have it here, actually. There we go. Truth should have a high place among the virtues, for falsehood is of no use to the gods, and truth should have a high place among the virtues, for falsehood is of no use to the gods and is useful only as a medicine in the case of men. The state physician or ruler may occasionally employ this medicine, but the subject must not in return tell a lie to the ruler. That would be as great an error as for the patient to tell a lie to the physician, or the sailor to his captain. If the ideal state is ever realized, the false word of any common man must be regarded as treason. So they call us liars and censor us on the basis of calling us liars, but they themselves deliberately lie to mislead us and to hurt us through their Judas goats and Pied Pipers into supporting their camp of traitorous leaders like Donald Trump, like Ron Paul, like Ronald Reagan, like Woodrow Wilson, to get them elected based on these lies and then to flip and do the exact opposite. They are leading Pharaoh's army into the Red Sea to kill it off by having the waters come in. And they are using the hatred of the Israelites as bait in a trap. And they have the alt-right and all the other people and the Muslims who helped to elect Trump, leading everyone into that trap of the Red Sea. And then they clamp the jaws shut on that lockjaw trap and kill us all off. And then these very same charlatans that they boosted and made into millionaires and funded and gave them millions of followers, they now pretend that they were somehow betrayed and that Trump is still the great guy and Trump too is being betrayed. And we got to save Trump from these people. So they continue this same psyop of getting you to side with Trump, who is your enemy. They continue these noble lies to dupe the masses, to rope them in, to get them corralled, to get the sheep to follow the Judas goat into the slaughterhouse, to get the Pied Piper to lead the children into the river or off the cliff. They're doing that to the masses, and they just keep it going. I've been exposing many of these same characters for 20 years, and people never catch on. They keep roping them back in to following these same Judas goats who are leading us all into disaster over and over again. Why would anyone follow someone who ever pushed for Trump? And many of these guys were pushing hard for Trump throughout 2024, despite what they claim now. This is again continuing with Plato, Book 3 of the Republic. Again, truth should be highly valued if, as we were saying, a lie is useless to the gods and useful only as a medicine to men, then the use of such medicines will have to be restricted to physicians. Private individuals have no business with them, so they get to lie, but we don't. Again, it's a caste system where we're at the bottom and they're at the top, and we have to obey them. And since they're few in number, they have to trick us into believing that they're doing what's best for us, but they knowingly lie to get us to do what's best for them. Clearly not, he said. Then the rulers of the state are the only persons who ought to have the privilege of lying, either at home or abroad. And this is what motivated Strauss. He is copying Platonism. They may be allowed to lie for the good of the state, but nobody else is to meddle with anything of the kind. And for a private man to lie in return to the rulers is to be deemed a more heinous fault than for a patient or the pupil of a gymnasium not to speak the truth about his own bodily illnesses to the physician or trainer, or for a sailor not to tell the captain truly how matters are going on in a ship. Most true, he said. If then the ruler catches anybody beside himself lying in the state, any of the craftsmen, whether he be priest, physician or carpenter, he will punish him for introducing a practice which is equally subversive of ship or state. That's what's happening to all the clowns on X. They're being called liars and they're being punished by the ruler. Yes, he said, if our principle is to be consistently carried out. How then may we devise one of those falsehoods in the hour of need, I said, which we lately spoke of, just one royal lie again our leadership class lying to us, which may deceive the rulers, if that be possible, and at any rate the rest of the city. What sort of lie? He said. Nothing new, I replied. Well, then, I will speak, although I really know not how to look you in the face, or in what words to utter the audacious fiction, which I propose to communicate gradually, first to the rulers, then to the soldiers, and lastly to the people. Again, there are rulers over our rulers telling them what lies to feed to us, and they also utilize these grifter influencers on social media to lie to us and to create false perceptions of our enemies as if they're our saviors. They are to be informed that their youth was a dream. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Especially to older people like me. And the education and training which they received from us an appearance only. In reality, during all that time, they were in process of formation and nourishment in the womb of the earth, where themselves and their arms and appurtenances were manufactured, and when they were completed, the earth, their mother, sent them up, and their country being their mother and also their nurse, they are therefore bound to advise for her good and to defend her against attacks by defending Israel and Russia. And her citizens, they are to regard as children of the earth and their own brothers. We're supposed to open up our own borders to all the people who want to take us over. I cannot wonder, he said, at your feeling ashamed of uttering the lie. Nay, I replied, there is more yet. I have not told you all. Citizens, we shall say to them in our tale, you are brothers. This is again this caste system that they're feeding to us. Liberty, fraternity, equality. But there's none of that in reality. Yet God has framed you differently. Some of you have the power of command, and these he has composed of gold. Those would be the Jews and the Asians now. Wherefore also they have the greatest honor. Others of silver to be auxiliaries, the blacks, Hispanics, etc. Others again are to be husbandmen and craftsmen, and he has made of brass and iron. That's increasingly becoming the whites, who are encouraged to become Amish subsistence farmers as Jews and Asians become the gold who lead us and lead all our industry and businesses and academia and pit them against us. But as you are of the same original family, a golden parent will sometimes have a silver son, or a silver parent a golden son. And God proclaims to the rulers as a first principle that before all they should watch over their offspring and see what elements mingle in their nature. For if the son of a golden or silver parent has an admixture of brass and iron, then nature orders a transposition of ranks, and the eye of the ruler must not be pitiful towards his child, because he has to descend in the scale and become a husbandman or artisan. So they have twisted this to the idea that now whites have to accept being less than all the other races. And they have pitted all the other races against us. As I was shouting in 2006, they want to bring America down by making America the partner of Israel and turning the whole world against America and pissing on whites, continually saying we're all colonialists and that we have oppressed all the other peoples. So now that we are the children of this great society, we are the children to be at the bottom of the pyramid of the caste system and to be spit upon and ultimately to be completely exterminated. And it's happening. You have to face that it's happening. I have ideas about what we can do about it in my book, which you can find at CJBBooks.com, Intelligent Morality. I explain this whole process and exactly what we can do to reverse it and to preserve ourselves and our future descendants. Elements being admixture of brass and iron. Then nature orders a transposition of ranks. In other words, the whites which were on top are to become on the bottom, and the Jews and the Asians are to take over the top, and the blacks and Hispanics are to take over the middle. And the eye of the ruler must not be pitiful towards his children, because he has to descend in the scale and become a husbandman or artisan. So the government has to not look upon the subjugation of whites as if it's a bad thing, because it's natural, because whites have become the brass and iron and must serve the silver and gold. Just as there may be others sprung from the artisan class who are raised to honor and become guardians and auxiliaries. So the Hispanics and blacks are to become the guardians and the auxiliaries and to rule over the whites. For an oracle says that when a man of brass or iron guards the state, it will then be destroyed. Such is the tale. Is there any possibility of making our citizens believe in it? Now, if you listen to the anti-white propaganda in America and in Europe, they are telling us in order to survive, we have to import this gold and silver class into our country, or we will be destroyed, because whites are this inferior iron and brass that is going to lead to calamity and destroy itself. So they're doing us a favor by replacing us, driving us down the pyramid in the hierarchy of the caste system and putting others to rule over us and take our place. This is all a distortion of Plato, and it's quite deliberate. Such is our own conception of them, and now let us consider what way of life will correspond with this conception. In the first place, none of them should have any property beyond what is absolutely necessary. That's Marxism. Neither should they have a private house with bars and bolts closed against anyone who has a mind to enter. That's defund the police and let whites be robbed as a sense of social justice for those whose the whites' ancestors had oppressed. Their provisions should be only such as are required by trained warriors, where again the soldiers, the Esau, who are men of temperance and courage. Their agreement is to receive from the citizens a fixed rate of pay, enough to meet the expenses of the year and no more. Whites are being driven down the income scale and being replaced by higher paid immigrants. And they will have common meals and live together like soldiers in a camp. Gold and silver will tell them that they have from God. The diviner metal is within them. Yes, the chosen people. And they have therefore no need of that earthly dross which passes under the name of gold, and ought not to pollute the divine by earthly admixture, for that commoner metal has been the source of many unholy deeds, but their own is undefiled. They are not to intermarry with the other races. The Israelites are not to intermarry and pollute the holy seed, but to remain separate. And they alone of all citizens may not touch or handle silver or gold, or be under the same roof with them, or wear them, or drink from them. And this will be their salvation, the salvation of the state. But should they ever acquire homes or lands or monies of their own, they will become housekeepers and husbandsmen instead of guardians, enemies and tyrants instead of allies of the other citizens. Hating and being hated, plotting and being plotted against, they will pass through life in much greater terror of internal than of external enemies, and the hour of ruin, both to themselves and the rest of the state, will be at hand. That's what they have planned next. They're creating civil tensions and social unrest in America, and they're using these wedge issues of Zionism and immigration to build about this internal strife so that we destroy ourselves, and then the Eurasianists can completely take us over. And at the same time, they are implanting the fifth column of the behemoth on our shores with Chinese and Indians, and with all kinds of immigrants from the Middle East, from Latin America, from Africa. They are flooding us so that they have their fifth column in place, so that when we begin to destroy ourselves and lose our advantage and continue fighting these wars and getting the whole world turned against us, they will have people within as well as without to finish off our complete annihilation. For all which reasons, we may not say that these are to be the regulations of our guardians respecting houses and all other things, and that such shall be our laws. So the double cross was to be expected. These people are Straussians. They deliberately lie to you directly or through their proxies to get you to elect their treasonous, treacherous leaders who are out to destroy the very people that they dupe into voting them. Their primary target are white American Christians, and they got the white American Christians to elect them into office and to elect their puppet leaders into office to ultimately completely destroy us, replace us, and promote our enemies against us and turn the whole world against us, and to get us involved as the Amalekite Kelly pot, the shell of the shattered vessels, protecting the divine spark of Israel with our military. They're going to utilize these agents who are engaging in espionage against us. This newest generation of fighter planes that the Chinese apparently have, all of that is based on stolen technology that the American government knowingly allowed the Chinese to rip us off from. They knowingly let them engage in espionage to get all of this technology, the hypersonic technology as well, the battery-powered technology, plasma technology, fusion technology. It was Armand Hammer's protege, Al Gore, together with Clinton, who built up the Chinese nuclear program so that they could build nuclear bombs to kill off Americans and Europeans. The Israelis provided the Chinese with American missile weapons technology to kill off Americans and Europeans. And now they're implanting them in our soil. They're going to get them to fill all the positions in academia, all of our industry. They're going to continue to engage in this espionage, continue to rip us off, continue to make whites technologically inferior, the bottom of the pyramid of the caste system, turn us into Esau, being their soldiers and being their slaves in the field, to keep us from teaching our kids to be engineers, and even if we do teach them, to keep them out of the professions, to not hire them, and instead to bring in all these foreigners to replace them in these positions, to engage in espionage so that the Chinese can have the state-of-the-art weapons, and the Russians and the North Koreans, so that they can kill us all off. This is the worst form of treachery imaginable. And a big part of it is this influencer grifter class on the internet, on social media, duping stupid, gullible people into believing that these are the great leaders, these are the great anti-Zionists and anti-immigrant leaders who are going to save us. And these jackasses have done nothing but make things worse, election cycle after election cycle, and it's all deliberate. And some of them are just too stupid to realize how they're being used, and they're greedy sons of bitches who love the limelight, love the attention, and love the money. And they flip-flop on every issue, and they go back and forth. And then when it's proven that all their advice was crap and garbage and led us straight into a trap, they lie and claim either that they were deceived or that they had said something else. Stop following these idiots. We need a class of influencers who are of a much higher caliber. A lot of these people are real lowlifes, complete degenerates, misogynists. Most of them promoting this supposedly white agenda are not white themselves. And they are hateful of white people. They are hateful of women. Some of them are closet homosexuals, and certainly not all homosexuals hate women. Of course not. but there are many who do, and these people are the worst of those. And again, it's this Straussian trap. They love deceiving you. They love knowing that you are so stupid and gullible. You follow them straight into the trap, and they hate you because you hate them, and they use their hatred of you as a trap to kill you off because they hate you. And they're outsmarting you, they're outdoing you, they're outspending you, and they're outworking you. And this has got to end, or we're done for. And we have to build something else. Instead of always discussing what has happened, we have to have plans and act upon those plans and carry out those plans to build something for ourselves that we can take our fate into our own hands. So I'm going to be talking more about that soon. Look into my new book, Intelligent Morality, at CJBBooks.com. Beware the World to Come is another good book to teach you about all of what's going on. And please like, share, and subscribe. I am heavily deboosted and shadow banned on all forms of social media. People are shocked by the fact that I'm not promoted by anyone, even though I've been the best voice for 30 years. I've been the innovator for 30 years. I've been revealing things that nobody else on earth has revealed consistently with 100% accuracy for 30 years. So please like, share, and subscribe. I want to thank my wonderful contributors. Again, thank you very much, so much. I'm in a much better mood now that I'm starting to receive some of the help I need to keep doing this. And thank you for helping. Thank you for helping to promote my work. Thank you for reposting it and leading people to it. And maybe at some point I can get some interviews and get the word out to more and more people. But I don't see that really accomplishing anything. I think we've got to get talented, gifted, successful people who are not perverts and degenerates involved in creating a new society and step outside of all this other garbage that they keep throwing at us with their Straussian politics of lying to us to dupe us into voting for their puppet leaders. We got to start building something real. The founding fathers created something in America as a sanctuary for us that served us so well until we allowed them to utilize our freedoms to enslave us. So we have to get away from all of them and all of this and build something on our own. And we can do it, and we can do it better than anything that has ever been created before, because we have learned so much from what has happened in the past few decades, and because technology has advanced to the point where we will no longer require a bottom class of untouchables. We'll have robotics and artificial intelligence for all of that. We can all be in the higher rungs of the social strata. I want to thank you all for listening very much, even if you disagree with me. And I will see you guys next time. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for the contributions. Really, thank you. Bye for now.